Spider-Man. Iconic and identifiable to pretty much everybody around the world, anyone could describe Spider-Man or Peter Parker's looks and superpowers like the back of their own hand.
He has those tights and that tight little
Wall crawling, web slinging, spidey senses, superhuman agility and strength. These abilities are always clearly on display and really go without saying.
Like, does it just come out of your wrists, or does it come out of anywhere else?
However, Spider-Man possesses a handful of abilities that often go overlooked. Whether obscure, circumstantial, or triggered in an act of desperation, some of his more unique powers are widely unknown and have rarely been seen. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Straightforward and quite common among super people and beings of all kind, calling Spider-Man's enhanced metabolism superhuman would be a vast understatement. Accelerated far beyond almost any hero or villain in Marvel Comics, Spider-Man's superior metabolism renders him immune to most contaminants. Whether poison, virus, disease, or bacteria, his resistance and recovery time to toxins are significantly higher than average. Furthermore, Spider-Man's unique physiology and radioactive blood have even prevented him from becoming a vampire after he got bit by one, killing the enzymes responsible for the transformation. On another occasion, Kraven the Hunter had pumped Spidey's body with enough tranquilizers to take out half a dozen elephants, and then buried his body, only for the webhead to dig himself out of his own grave 2 weeks later. Although powerful in general, Spider-Man does have an average human tolerance for one thing: alcohol. Kinda convenient, isn't it? Although not explored much in any medium, Spider-Man's super speed is subconsciously obvious and widely acknowledged throughout Marvel Comics and film history. Super strength, super reflexes, super agility, it's only sensible and fitting that super speed is included on that list of abilities. Now, he's nowhere near as fast as a person or mutant recognized as a speedster, such as Quicksilver. But Spider-Man is, however, fast enough to keep up with a speeding train and can even dodge a barrage of bullets with relative ease. Outrunning explosions, catching up with planes, hustling past mobs of law officers or the Sinister Six, the consensus is Spider-Man can run to an upper limit of about 200 to 250 miles per hour. To put that into perspective, the fastest man on the planet, Usain Bolt, runs at speeds of about 27 miles per hour. Fluctuating in speed depending on who's writing him and his stories at the time, it is universally accepted and understood that Spider-Man is one of the fastest Earth-based superheroes on foot, who again is not classified as a speedster. One of his lesser known abilities, which often plays hand in hand with Peter Parker's technological proficiency, Spider-Man is able to detect and track radio frequencies. Developing spider tracers, tracking devices he uses to bug objects or individuals, Spider-Man originally had a small electronic receiver to accompany these tiny gadgets. However, after refining the technology over time, Spider-Man is now able to use his Spidey sense to detect the signal emitted by his tracers. Although they have come in handy more often than not, some of Spider-Man's technology-based enemies have been able to use the tracers to lure him into traps, rerouting their signals in order to trick the webhead. Most notably, the sentient machine lifeform, ironically called Tracer, reprogrammed the devices, effectively messing with Spider-Man's sixth sense. Now, with a name like Tracer, you would think that the machine would have no problems pulling this off. After the events of the other story arc in Marvel Comics, Spider-Man in particular was heavily impacted and developed many new powers. One of Spidey's newfound powers was the ability to communicate with and even persuade spiders. I mean, it only makes sense that Spider-Man would eventually be able to talk to his own kind, right? Although Doctor Strange had at one point cast a spell allowing Spider-Man to speak to arachnids, Spidey eventually developed this power on his own. When the Spider-Queen came a-knocking and the events of Spider Island took place, Spider-Man straight up chatted with her army of spiders and convinced them to halt their invasion. In a funnier instance, during a story called Peter Talks to a Spider, Peter Parker hung out with a giant arachnid at the beach, who comedically informed him that the end of his spider-like life cycle was imminent. Another power realized and briefly cultivated after the other storyline, Spider-Man has always had enhanced vision that seems to be developing and evolving further over the years. Initially, he had no need for his glasses since the day he was bit by a radioactive spider, but Peter Parker soon discovered his pristine night vision while rummaging through a collapsed apartment building, in search of any survivors. Seeing crystal clear in the dark, it was revealed that Spider-Man's biological night vision system allows him to look at everything through a green tinge, similar to military goggles. Now, this is a power that has largely been forgotten about in continuity. Spider-Man would even go on to install night vision lenses into his suit, completely disregarding the fact that this natural ability was somewhat established prior. garnering powers not even related to spiders in any way whatsoever. Once again, after the other story arc, Spider-Man would develop retractable stingers, akin to Wolverine's natural bone claws. Essentially, giant blades would shoot out of Peter Parker's hands. The stingers were apparently triggered by Spider-Man's intense levels of fear and duress. Although not a permanent feature of his physiology, he does technically possess the ability to use these weapons when vehemently scared or in peril. Used more often and mastered by Peter Parker's clone Kane Parker, who we'll talk about a bit more later on in this video, it begs the question, could Spider-Man hone his retractable stinger capabilities over time? While devolved and in a feral state, Peter Parker unwillingly transformed into the mutated Man-Spider when triggered. There are a few different variants of this character throughout Marvel media. However, for the most part, they share the same characteristics and abilities. With 8 appendages, 6 eyes, and a giant head, including razor-sharp claws and teeth, Man-Spider can also spit acid in his opponent's faces. Furthermore, Man-Spider can shoot webbing from every limb on his body, without the need for web shooters. Another version of this character is known as the Doppelganger, a replica of Spider-Man created during the Infinity War story arc in the comics. Evil and nearly mindless, Doppelganger would often side with the likes of Carnage and Shriek, the latter somewhat adopting him as a son, or pet dog to say the least. Although Doppelganger has not been seen spitting any acid, I wouldn't doubt that the possibility exists, especially when the Doppelganger is infused with a symbiote. Also known as the Mark of Cain, Spider-Man's previously mentioned amoral clone, Kane Parker, discovered that the microtendrils in his hands, generally used for climbing and sticking to surfaces, could also be used offensively as, well, some rather disturbing weapons. Burning, scarring, or tearing the flesh of his opponents, Kane, aka Tarantula, aka the Scarlet Spider, has used this torture technique during many interrogations and fights. Although he cannot actually burn himself with these lethal tendrils, they have rendered Kane's hands deformed due to his high volume of usage. By proxy, Peter Parker learned that he also possessed this ability. Seen sparingly though, in one brutal instance, maiming Norman Osborn's face, Peter claimed that he's unlikely to ever use this vicious power again. The most iconic of Spider-Man's abilities, his all-encompassing spider sense, is primarily used to anticipate enemy movement and imminent danger. Discovering that the potential of this power is more extensive than initially realized, Peter's sixth sense enables him to literally glimpse a few seconds or even minutes into the future. The precise nature of how this sense has expanded or evolved over time really remains unknown. Much like the aforementioned burning touch and retractable stingers, Kane Parker has an exceptionally developed preference for premonition in comparison to Peter. In what appears to be a clairvoyant response to a wide variety of phenomena, Kane's anticipation of the future is much more profound and pronounced. Perhaps the fact that he's a replica or clone amplifies these super senses, but again, the answer remains unknown. Also, fun fact, in one version of the future, Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson have a daughter whose own spider sense is able to see an entire day ahead. So, you know, there's quite a bit of precedence for it in the comics. Since the revelation that all Spider-Men, Spider-Women, and Spider-Things across the Spider-Verse are connected via the web, an interdimensional force that allows time and multiversal travel, we have met a plethora of spider people and spider beings over the years. Webman, Miles Morales, Scarlet Spider, Spider-Girl, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Monkey, Spider-Ham, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man 2099, Cyborg Spider-Man, Werewolf Spider-Man, the list goes on, and each one of these characters are meaningful strands in the web connecting the fabric of space and time. With every reality and plane of existence having what is known as a spider totem, a pillar connecting the multiverse, it was revealed that Peter Parker is of course one of them, alluding that Peter's powers are ultimately mystical, cosmic, and perhaps divine in destiny. It seems as though his radioactive spider bite mishap may have been necessary in preserving the natural order of the multiverse. Traveling to and from universes and being visited the same way on multiple occasions, the fact that this ability is readily available to Spider-Man at any given time bafflingly goes overlooked. And for that, interdimensional travel garners the #1 spot in our rankings. And that's our list. Do you think we'll ever see Spider-Man evolve physically, developing crazy powers and mutating further inside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Please sound off and let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and web-sling that notification bell for even more wall-crawling comic content.